William III of Orange was the rising star of his time, born as a son of a renowned Stadtholder but died as a King of England. He shook Europe in the 17th century and achieved the nearly impossible. How did this little prince emerge as a star that almost shone as bright as the Sun King himself? William was born on the 14th of November 1650, son of William II and Mary Henrietta Stuart. This meant he was heir to the title of Stadtholder and descendant of the English throne. But his father tried to overthrow the government the same year, which failed, and then he died. This left the Republic open for the estates to take over power. When the Republic lost the First Anglo-Dutch War in 1654, England was ruled by Oliver Cromwell, whom favoured the estates above the prince, and Johan de Witt, who was Councillor of the Republic, also favoured the estates. So when peace was made, the Act of Seclusion was signed. It stated that no member of the Orange family would ever be able to rule as Stadtholder again. William, his future, did not look very promising at this point. As a kid, William's health was very poor. On multiple occasions, his doctors did not think he would survive another disease. While he was suffering from smallpox, his chamberlain, Hans Willem Bentinck, would not stray from his side. This forged an almost unbreakable bond between the two, and Bentinck would be William's best friend and main advisor for many years to come. Even though William survived smallpox, it left him prone to disease for the rest of his life, and because of the polluted air in the cities, William preferred to live in the countryside, where he could also hunt, which was his favorite thing to do. When in 1672 the Republic was attacked by a coalition of France, England, Münster and Cologne, it was about to be wiped off the map. This war is known as the disaster year in Dutch history. King Louis XIV, also known as the Sun King, wanted revenge on the Republic for their interference in the War of Devolution a couple years prior. And he also wanted to expand France's borders to the Rhine, which would be used as natural border and defense. The King of England was Charles II, William his uncle. Charles wanted to reduce the Republic its trade and fleet because it conflicted with the Act of Navigation, and the German miners just got promised land by France if they would join. From the south came the French, and from the east came the German miners. The English mainly fought on the seas. Marquis of Turenne, Prince of Condé and Marshal Luxembourg had control of the French armies. They quickly advanced and sieged the city of Maastricht. The French army decided to move on, leaving some of the troops behind to continue the siege. They adopted this tactic across the south, which allowed the French to make a swift advance, trapping the Dutch armies. Very soon they had captured Utrecht, which is in the center of the Republic and one of the major cities. Meanwhile, the Dutch population had not forgotten William and the role the Orange family had played its short history ruling the Republic. The Orange Stadtholders were also the leader of the armies and had great success in the 80 Years' War. So it was natural for the Dutch citizens to think that having an Orange leader would lead to success. They pressured Johan de Witt, and it led to him giving William a one-time leadership over the armies. For William, this was a big win. Him being made general opened the door for prestige and more. The war was going terrible so far. The French had just encircled the major fortifications in the south and moved on, trapping most of the Dutch armies. William quickly sought refuge in Utrecht with his remaining army, but the city favored surrendering to the French over a siege, so they sent him away. William had to go further back to Holland. There, a crisis had erupted. The politicians were torn between the Republicans and the Orangists. The Republicans wanted to get rid of William, while the Orangists wanted him back in power. Johan de Witt, the leader of the Republicans, got all the blame for the poor results in the war and was forced to abdicate. Now the estates could grant William his stadtholdership. For them, this was the only thing that could save them. At least it would give a slight morale boost to the troops. So, William was made stadtholder. When Johan, his brother Cornelis, was put to jail, being accused of plotting to kill William, Johan visited him. he found Cornelis in very bad shape. He was tortured, but had still not confessed. Meanwhile, outside the jail, people heard of the De Witt brothers being in there. A raging riot erupted. People were still angry at the brothers. They forced the door, went upstairs and dragged the brothers out, killing them right outside and gutting them. It is likely that William had paid for the riot and have the brothers killed. But why would he do that? He already was made Stadtholder. The Republic had a last line of defense called the waterline. It meant that the dikes from Naden to the south would be punctured, flooding all the lower laying fields. First it was only about knee deep, sometimes not even. This was due to the poor morale and organization. This was a result of Jan de Witt's policy of putting navy above the army, not fearing a land invasion. William personally saw to it that the waterline would be executed properly. It had to not just be knee-deep water, but a true lake separating the country in half. Only this, the Republic's dearest ally, would save it from the French. At multiple occasions the bell would ring in The Hague, at which the people would quickly pack up and flee, only to realize it was a false alarm. Around this time the cities in the west, such as Amsterdam and The Hague, ran full of refugees coming from the rest of the Republic, making every resource scarce, and money even more so. Not only the Dutch were in financial problems, also were the French. What was to be a 17th century blitzkrieg turned out to be a waiting game. The French were quickly bored now there was nothing to fight against. France used a system called inquartering, which meant that every family was to take in a number of French soldiers. The soldiers often demanded more than they deserved and harmed the family. There was barely any discipline. Using terror was even promoted by the French Minister of War, François Letellier, Marquis of Louvois, and greedily executed by Marshal Luxembourg, hoping it would break the Dutch morale. There were reports of people being hanged from their chimneys, roasting above their own fireplace. There was also the fear that the winter would freeze up the waterline. It happened at one occasion and the French crossed. The Dutch garrison troops saw the enemy advance and fled. But the French had to go back because they could not advance on their own. The Republic narrowly escaped death. Louis went back to France while his generals kept harassing and exploiting the Dutch cities. Dutch diplomats went out on what may have been the most important mission ever in the survival of the Republic. Finally, after a long, hard process of negotiating, they managed to not only get Brandenburg into the fight, but also the Austrian Emperor and Spain. Now the Republic was leading a coalition of its own against France. It seemed they were about to be cornered. The Allied advance was very slow. This was because of conflicting nobility in the army. Everybody thought, or they liked to think, that they had command. And so they made conflicting orders. Sometimes they marched back just to annoy the other noble who wanted to advance. Meanwhile, England had signed peace with the Republic. Parliament feared that Charles was getting too close to Louis, who was a Catholic, and that he wanted to reduce the power of Parliament, thus gaining power for himself. Refusing to grant Charles any more money, Parliament forced Charles to sign the Peace of Westminster in 1674. Then, in the same year, Sweden joined the war, but on the French side. They wanted to rush Brandenburg and capture Berlin, which they almost succeeded. Only Denmark found Sweden too aggressive and joined the war against them, so they joined the Dutch. But the Swedes fought back, recapturing the southern part of Sweden from the Danes. Meanwhile, the French continued to fight in the Alsace area, seeking to plunder as much as possible, continuing their terror. This is where the war was being fought from then on. France was now fighting against 4 major powers, and to make matters worse, England joined the war against France. Parliament forced Charles to conceal the alliance with the Republic by marrying out his niece, Mary. Mary was the daughter of Charles, his brother James. thus making William and Mary possible heirs to the throne of England. Louis quickly realized he had to make his move before the entire coalition would come down upon France. He marched on Flanders and captured Ghent and Ypres. From this position, he was again a threat to the Republic. Now everybody wanted peace, and peace was signed on the 10th of August 1678, called the Peace of Nijmegen. France would cede Maastricht back to the Republic, but kept Franche-Comté and Lorraine. It seemed the Dutch Republic was safe with William at the helm. Louis had attacked the Republic, hoping to crush it once and for all, but unknowingly he gave William the opportunity to rise to power, and thus created his rival in the fire of his own forge. William and Louis would be rivals for the rest of their lives. In 1685, King Charles II of England died. Now his Catholic brother James succeeded to the throne, becoming James II. James liked the idea of being an absolute ruler and adored Louis XIV, his absolute reign in France. Parliament feared that James would try to gather more power for himself, making Catholicism the official faith and ruling out Parliament. So, in 1673, the Test Act had been enacted, which stated that Catholics were not allowed to perform official government functions. And now, in 1679, Parliament proposed the Exclusion Bill. It stated that no Catholic would be able to succeed to the throne. Charles purposely tried to postpone the bill right up until he died, so his brother would still be able to succeed him. Charles feared that if James was excluded from succession, a new civil war would erupt over who was to be the new successor. It is also important to know that Louis XIV of France preferred a Catholic Europe, so he sent money to Charles. In that way, he did not need money from Parliament to sustain himself, and thus he was able to postpone the bill. When Charles died in 1685, he had dissolved Parliament multiple times and even converted to Catholicism on his deathbed. His brother James was crowned King of England, Scotland and Ireland on the 23rd of April 1685. He immediately started exercising power. He revoked the Test Act, replaced government officials with Catholics and forced clerics to proclaim the Declaration of Indulgence in their churches, which pled for toleration of the Catholic faith. Parliament was furious. This was unacceptable. But as long as James did not have an heir, his Catholic reign was not yet consolidated. That was until the 10th of June 1688, when James's second wife gave birth to her fifth child, a son. James quickly declared him his new heir, and Parliament feared the worst. Meanwhile, in the Dutch Republic, William and his wife Mary had kept a keen eye on the dire situation in England. James was Mary her father, only he was a Catholic and she was a Protestant. If James did not have a male heir, Mary was the first in line to succeed him. William knew this very well. He already showed Europe that he was the protagonist of the Protestant faith and a rival of Louis XIV and his absolute rule. It is not certain who started the discussion between Parliament and William, but it is certain that William would only invade England if Parliament would grant him their support. So, on the 18th of June 1687, William got a letter saying that at least 6 nobles and 1 cleric, known as the Immortal Seven, would support him. But William had to act fast. Tension was rising in England, and if the revolt would start without him being there, England might just become a republic like under Oliver Cromwell, and no one wanted that. So William built a fleet bigger than the Spanish Armada. Only he needed money from Amsterdam to pay for it. For years Amsterdam had been pro-France and pro-peace, so that trade would prosper. But Louis seemed unstoppable. Now he had annexed German cities and started war again. William made a plea to Amsterdam, saying that if they don't act now to strengthen their own position, there likely will be another disaster here, and then the Republic would surely collapse. Amsterdam finally agreed and paid for the massive fleet. On the 11th of November 1688, William set out to England with his fleet consisting of 500 ships, 3 times the size of the Spanish Armada. He landed in Torquay and from there he quickly advanced. With every step, even more nobles joined William and James realized his cause was lost. James then fled towards the harbour where he tried to get on board of a ship that would bring him to France. It nearly worked, but he got recognized and brought back to London where now William had arrived. William was rather disappointed because now he had to make up for something so that James could still escape. So he brought James to the harbour. He put him in prison, but with very little supervision. So that night, James escaped to France, where he resided in the royal palace of Saint-Germain-en-Laye and enjoyed a royal pension from Louis. Parliament now faced a dilemma about who would rule England, Mary, William or both. William let Parliament decide for themselves, but after a while he found it went too slow. Putting pressure on Parliament, they decided that both William and Mary were going to rule England. On the 13th of November 1689, William and Mary were crowned King and Queen of England. Together they enacted the Bill of Rights, giving more power to Parliament and laying the foundation for a democratic constitutional monarchy. But Louis could not accept the fact that his rival had just acquired England from right under his nose. So after a while he sent out James with an army to Ireland, where he still had somewhat of authority. Then, on the 11th of July 1690, it finally came to a decisive battle. James had landed in Ireland and William set out to battle him. There they fought, known as the Battle of the Boyne. William won and James fled again to France. At the time, French nobles were very divided on what to think of William. The court at Versailles had become boring and dull now Louis turned older. Louis, his sister-in-law, Elisabeth Charlotte, also known as Liselotte or La Palatine, once said about William, "Who is this William? Rising star of Europe, so magnificent." Whilst Louis detested William and refused to acknowledge him as King of England. There was no time to rest for William, now Louis had involved himself in the Palatine succession crisis which turned into the 9 Years' War. William had to keep travelling from being at the front lines in mainland Europe to ruling England from Kensington Palace. The best way to achieve this was to let his wife Mary rule together with his advisors. In the beginning of their relationship, Mary did not like politics and thought that a light conversation might cheer William up, but it didn't. So now Mary started to learn from advisors and kept herself up to date about European politics. This way she managed to rule England while William was gone. William built his own palace in the Republic called Hedlow. It was everything like Versailles, but nothing like it. It was supposed to be a true palace, but there should not be any glorification. This way William managed to show off his prestige, but in an acceptable manner. The court in the Republic was nothing like the court in France or England. In the Republic, William only had a handful of servants and could enjoy life in private, while Mary in England had a court of hundreds, if not thousands of servants. And she had to live every aspect of her life in public, such as eating or going to bed. It is often rumored that William had an affair with his best friend Hans Willem Bentinck. But I think that is not true because of two reasons. William actually had a long-lasting affair with another woman called Elisabeth Villiers, and William eventually replaced Bentinck with Arnold Joost van Keppel. Mary tried to make William get rid of his mistress, but he kept coming back to her. Then on the 7th of January 1695, Mary laid on her bed, suffering from smallpox. William never left her room until Mary said she got tired of his continuous sobbing, making him sleep in another room. Mary died and William was devastated. The only thing he could do was to fulfill Mary her last wish, to get rid of his mistress, Elizabeth, which he finally did. William went from being the most happy person to the most miserable creature on earth, letting himself be vulnerable to disease and malnutrition. He saw nobody for a month. Meanwhile, the 9 Years' War was still going on. Louis was taking advantage of the Ottomans attacking Austria, which meant that Austria had to divide their troops to the east and to the west. France raided lots of German cities, stealing art and valuables and blowing the cities up afterwards, just for the sake of it. But now France also had to fight the Dutch Republic and England. The French lost massively on the seas, such as at the Battle of La Hogue on the 4th of June 1692. Not only the war was a concern for Louis, also hunger and famine ravaged through France. Eventually, on the 20th of September 1697, a peace treaty was signed, the Peace of Rijswijk. Louis got to keep Alsace and Strasbourg, but he had to overcome a major obstacle. He had to recognize William as the King of England. William got his prestige leading a coalition against France for the second time, and a third time was about to come, but this time it would be the last. When on the 1st of November in 1700 Charles II of Spain died, he had no heir. So Louis, afraid that Austria would claim the throne, claimed it for his grandson, Philippe, thus triggering a succession war over Spain between France and Austria. It was time for the coalition to take up arms again. There is no need for explaining this, as something terrible is about to happen. Whilst William was on one of his usual hunting trips, his horse tripped and fell. William broke his collarbone and was brought to Kensington Palace, where he fell asleep by an open window. There he caught a cold, which turned into pneumonia and killed him. On the 19th of March 1702, William, King of England, Scotland and Ireland, Prince of Orange and Stadtholder of the Dutch Republic, died. He was buried next to his wife Mary in Westminster Abbey. His sister-in-law Anne succeeded him in England, but in the Republic the States declared the second Stadtholderless era, once again denouncing the Princes of Orange. William was the son of a denounced Stadtholder, yet he managed in the time of troubles to regain the title with a little help of his enemy Louis. Even more, Louis made William his lifelong rival, which put William in the European spotlights and opened up prestigious paths. William married Mary Stuart, and together they took the crown of England, making them rulers of England, Scotland, Ireland and the Dutch Republic. William had seen it all, been there all and done it all. Truly a rising star, so magnificent. Thank you for watching my video. Please leave a like if you enjoyed it, comment your thoughts below and subscribe if you want to see more.